It's the first thing in Race Marxism, my book about critical race theory, the first sentence. Critical race theory, noun. Calling everything you want to control racist until you control it. Queer theory, we could do the same thing. Noun, calling everything you want to control homophobic and transphobic until you control it. That's what woke is. Woke is an excuse to use ideas like bigotry to take control of people and institutions.
And so, James, let's talk about a couple elements of this. Every single one of these kids, unless they go to Hillsdale or Liberty, are going to be hearing kind of like this relentless campaign from professors and teachers. You're white, you're not allowed to comment on this. Or you don't understand that we are systemically racist. Where do these terms come from? And how should, let's just say there's a white student in the audience here, and a professor says, you're white, you're not allowed to comment on this. How should they respond to that?
Well, I mean, in the moment, this is always going to be a tricky thing, but you've got to say, yes, I can. Just, yes, I can. My comment counts. This is actually, by the way, how I got started in all this way back in like 2013. I was at a table, mixed group. There was some blue-collar friends of mine. There were some white-collar, actually academic friends of mine. We were at the same party. We're sitting there talking, and this guy's talking about affirmative action and how it's led to some issues at his factory, the blue-collar guy. And the academic white woman says, that sounds a little bit racist. And he's like, blah, blah, blah. I try to intervene, and it's like all falling apart. And he's like telling his story. And I said, listen, you all the time talk about how we have to hear people's stories. This is a story, and you don't want to hear it. And she said, well, he's a white man. His story's already been told. This is a story. You're all about hearing people's stories. Why can't we hear these other stories? Is actually an answer you can give. I'm not going to say it's going to get you anywhere, but what you have to learn is that they're not interested in the truth. So what you have to do is say these things, let them say the horrible thing back to you, and then make that go viral. You have to make attention come to that. One of the papers that we wrote, one of the fake papers was about education. We called it the progressive stack. We said that the teachers should not allow white male students to talk in class. They should listen and learn in silence, can't ask questions, can't raise their hand, don't get their emails answered, get spoken over, should have to sit on the floor. They can wear chains to experience reparations in class, be humiliated and embarrassed. But we should do it compassionately because we're writing funny papers, right? And so we have to do it with compassion. And the peer reviewers, this, Charlie, is the turning point, by the way. The peer reviewers wrote back and said, we love this idea, but you can't use compassion because that might recenter the needs of the privileged students over the oppressed students. And I said, oh my God, there's a genocide at the end of this. That's where I went. A couple weeks later, you're married, you'll understand how this works. I went a couple weeks later, said to my wife, can I quit my job and dedicate it to studying this and exposing it? Because this ends at the end of civilization is where this goes. And you have to be able to stand and say, listen, my opinion counts too, and if you don't want to count it, let's hear you just own that. Make them own the things that they actually believe that are horrible, that are un-American, that are immoral, that are sometimes absolutely perverse. Make them own them. That's what we've been doing for a couple of years now, and it's the most effective tool. You're not going to win in the moment with somebody who has tons of power over you, but you can set them up to be humiliated and embarrassed, or maybe even at the end of a lawsuit.
How do you respond, James, when you hear from an activist, a classmate, a professor, administrator, that I have my own truth and you have your own truth?
You just ask them, I guess, is that true? Is that universally true for like everybody? Like that there are truths for some people and not truths for other people? Because what they're doing is they're saying, I have special knowledge nobody else is allowed to have. And you have to ask them if something like that is universally applicable. What on earth gives them the right, the authority? Why do you believe you have the authority to know things nobody else can know? Where did you get that? Did you just kind of wake up with it in the morning? What's the deal? You've got to ask them, where do you think you get the authority to talk like that? Of course, you don't have your truth and I don't have my truth. There is the truth. And the truth, if you want to get technical about it, is that which any independent observer can go verify for themselves.
And I believe the truth will set you free, firmly and completely. And so, but James, even the term truth is a threatening academic concept, is it not?
Yeah, because they have woven together the idea of truth and power, which makes sense because there is an immense amount of power, as in the exact kind of power that will take them out of the game in the truth. The truth will actually knock them off their pedestal. It will depose them, so they have to suppress the truth. They have to hide the truth, which means, by the way, that they are not just dumb. or ignorant or crazy. They are, in fact, and I want to train you guys to start using this word. They are wicked, which means they are doing evil and they know they're doing evil. They are wicked. They are suppressing the truth because that's the only way their lies can go forward. So what they've done is they've wrapped truth and power together as one concept. This is what postmodernism kind of boils down to. Oh, the truth is whoever has power gets to say is true and everything else is false. And like I just said, there's a way to cut right across that. No, the truth is that which any independent observer can see. The truth is what hits you in the face when your beliefs are wrong.
So why is woke and truth incompatible? What is it about the woke that is threatened by the truth and how the truth overcomes the woke?
Well, they're incompatible because the truth will question things that woke people are saying, like, for example, that we can't tell what men and women are. And I think any of us can tell what men... I think even they know anybody can tell what men and women are, except for maybe a very small percentage of them. And what that will do is it will remove their justification to power. The fact of the matter is the reason that truth is dangerous is because truth is accessible to anybody. Therefore, it's not only accessible to tyrants.
But I need to interrupt you, James. I hope you guys understand this. How many times have you heard, you're not studying it, you don't have a PhD, you're not allowed to comment on this? What they're doing is they're saying you're not in the secret society to be able to open your mouth. What we believe in is that every human being has access to the truth, regardless if you have a PhD or not. You don't have to be in the secret society to be able to say that men can't give birth. You do not have to be in the secret society, right, James? They're trying to create this secret cabal almost.
That's exactly what it is. It's a club. You've got to get the credentials. That's what they told me. That's why I wrote the fake papers. Oh, you can't criticize this. At first it was, well, you're a white man. Of course you don't understand. But then my criticisms must have got too close because I just kept hammering at them. And they're like, well, you don't have a PhD. You're not an expert. You aren't credentialed. You're not in the club.
PhD.
I do have a PhD, but it's in the wrong field. But then you could have somebody who has a PhD in the right field, but if they say the wrong thing, there's actually a guy, I think his name's Eric Anderson or something like this. He developed this whole concept of what he called inclusive masculinity, and he was all the vogue for a number of years. And then all of a sudden, he said something because he actually believes in, observable, objective reality, and he believes in empirical science, even though he's kind of in this sort of direction. And all of a sudden, they came for him. They canceled him. His theory's all wrong. It just turned around on him like overnight. He had a PhD in the right stuff. He was doing the right things. But he said, I actually care about observable truth. I care about who can do the experiment. And that's the thing. They are erecting a false reality. The truth will knock them off of it, and anybody can access the truth, which means they can take them out.
But it requires truth tellers. The truth in existence will always be there, but it requires you to have the courage to speak that truth.
It requires more than that. And I'm going to get a little biblical on you, if you don't mind. It doesn't just require truth tellers. It is hard to tell the truth, especially now, especially if you're in the disenfranchised or marginalized position that you are, and don't dip into that victimization. They are marginalizing you. That's why they use that word all the time. They marginalize their opponents. Mao Zedong said, to not have correct political opinions is like not having a soul. In other words, not being a person, which justifies them doing whatever they want to do to you. But the fact is, it's not enough to say the truth. You have to love the truth. You have to love the truth, to get biblical with you, with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind, and all of your strength. And you must pursue the truth. You must pursue the truth again when they lie to you. And then you must speak it at every turn to the best of your ability. Every single time you get the chance. You have to love the truth the way that the religious people love God. You can't, it's the same thing. You can't step away from that. You have to love it. You have to cherish the truth. You have to act like the truth is something that you actually have to advocate for, that you love, that you support in all ways, in all corners. And that's the way that truth drives out lies, truth drives out darkness, truth drives out evil. It's absolutely necessary, not just that you speak the truth, but that you love the truth. And it's hard, because it will knock you off your pedestal too.
Now, James, let's get to something that every single person here will encounter. The queer theory, the LGBTQ mafia, the rainbow jihadis, this tyrannical thing that we just lived through in the month of June. What what are we living through? I've made the comparison that this is like conquered land and conquered territory, with now we have competing flags. In fact, more pride flags than American flags. What's going on?
Well, I mean, that's what colonization is. Don't you know how they obsess about colonization? Well, guess what? They've been studying it since the 50s. Of course they're going to colonize. So when you see at the White House that they put the pride flag in between two American flags, there's two pride flags.
Two pride flags, one American flag.
When you see that, they're telling you we've colonized your country from within. So that's a good way to look at it.
Sandwiching.
But you said rainbow jihadis. I actually want to switch that for you. I want to call them the Rainbow Guard, which is has a historical precedent to the Red Guard in communist China. What we are living through, what you are experiencing day to day, and what you have been experiencing at least since 2015, although you may not have noticed it till 2020, is a cultural revolution, just like happened in China in 1966 through 76. You were living through a cultural revolution. Now, I have some bad news for the woke, for the mafia, or the jihadis, or whatever, the Rainbow Guard, because Mao let loose in 1966 the Red Guard, which were his communist youth. He let loose to smash the four olds, to destroy the old culture, to destroy the old society, tear down statues, rename streets, cut off their old family names and adopt new names. You know, they had dead names back then, too, that you couldn't say anymore. They had their revolutionary names. He unleashed them to hound and struggle. That's the word, struggle. Do struggle sessions, dojang in Chinese. Struggle people who had wrong political opinions, which often included humiliating them, putting them up for public spectacle, beating them sometimes to death in the streets, robbing them of all their possessions, embarrassing them, making them confess that they weren't good communists up to the standard. And, you know, that started in 1966, Charlie. In 1967, give you an idea how powerful the Rainbow Guard could become. In 1967, 1.5 years later, they went and they grabbed the chairman of the CCP, Liu Shaoqi, who had become Mao's chief political rival, did it to him, dragged him, the dictator of China, out of his place of power, humiliated him in the street, sent him off to die in misery in the countryside. And then you know what Mao did after he got his seat back because they deposed his political rival? A month later, at the end of 1967, he declared, the Red Guard is too left. It's too radical. It's not necessary for this stage of the revolution. And he unleashed the People's Liberation Army on them, and they went away by 1968. There was no more Red Guard. That's the future of the Rainbow Guard that's colonizing our country, unfortunately, for them. So if you're worried about it, the Pride Month thing has a time limit. It's not going to persist. It's not useful after this stage of the revolution. But what we're living through is a cultural revolution. What we are living through is what happened in Mao's China in 1966. And now this is what you and I have been talking about for a month or two, Charlie. The question before every one of you is, can a cultural revolution be stopped? And if so, how? Let me give you some discouragement followed by some encouragement. Discouragement. There's only been one cultural revolution so far. It happened in China, and it didn't go that well. The CCP is now in its 74th year of power. Let me give you some encouragement. The United States of America is not China. The situation you find yourself in is also not the situation. I'll give you a little history. I know we're trying to not be too dorky, but a little history lesson. The CCP actually took over China in 1949. If you did the math from 74 years, you figured that out already. Okay? 1949. But I told you the Cultural Revolution started in 1966. What does that mean? That means that there were 16 and a half years during which the communists already had been breaking Chinese society. In 1958 and 9, Mao Zedong launched a program that was supposed to bring China to the top of industrial standards of the world called the Great Reset. Wait, no. Great Leap Forward. It was a Great Leap Forward. Sorry, I mixed those up. But I did that on purpose as a joke because the fact of the matter is the Great Reset is meant to break the U.S., break the West, break Europe, break Australia, New Zealand, Canada, exactly in the same way, because the reason the Cultural Revolution worked is by 1962, we cannot comprehend, unless you lived there or you have parents or grandparents who lived there, the devastation that this caused. The reason Mao had a political rival in Liu Shaoqi was they made him leave office. They kicked him out as dictator because he killed 55 million people and ruined the Chinese economy in 3 years with the Great Leap Forward. I did the math on this the other day, Charlie. You guys have ever seen the Great Pyramids at Giza in Egypt? So you know there's the two big ones, and then there's the smaller one, then there's those three little ones. Well, that smaller one, the medium-sized one, if you took the skulls of the people who were murdered in the Great Leap Forward only and stacked them up in a square pyramid, that's how big it is. That's what Mao did. That's what the Great Leap Forward did. So you have 4 years out, that ended in 1962. 1966, he launches a cultural revolution. So that didn't sound very encouraging. We don't have that. They did not do that to us. So we are in a different circumstance to answer this historical question differently. Can a cultural revolution be stopped? Yes. How? Americans. That's how.
And this is why what you're doing is so important. This is why President Trump, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Dan Bongino, they want to spend time with you, because they have to go through the youth, right, James? Is that they go through Mao's Red Guard was primarily young college kids. It was introduced through the CCP's university system.
Yeah, that's right. So in 1949, Mao takes over. A little more history. Take notes. There's a quiz. He takes over in 1950. Do you know what Mao did? He fired every teacher in China. Every single teacher. He took every textbook in China and got rid of every single one. And for the next 2 years, between 50 and 52, they brainwashed the teachers, and you were not allowed back in the classroom until you passed your socialist proof exam, and they rewrote the textbooks so that people didn't even have textbooks. They didn't even have textbooks to learn. So for 1952 or so until 1966, they had 14 relentless years of communist education only from communist teachers who were towing the party line, who were completely indoctrinated and brainwashed. So the entire generation of young people who are entering what Mao called his revolutionary high schools and revolutionary colleges and universities were brainwashed on his program, and that is who he activated into the Red Guard to go take over. Why do you think that they're pushing queer theory in the schools?
So why? Why are they doing that?
So that they can brainwash and break a generation of people your age and younger, so that when George Floyd dies, for example, they'll go out in the street and tear down statues and break windows and burn down buildings and kill people and yell at people and everything else. So that they will throw a gigantic fit when their life isn't going the way that it is and demand hope and change at every turn. So they will go and tell you that you are wrong and you are bullied, or you need to be bullied and struggled into having the right beliefs against racism and transphobia. They are activating an entire generation of David Hoggs and the youth to go out and mess up our society because they know it's possible, they know it works because it's been done before.
And the threat to them is Turning Point USA chapter leaders scattering across the country after this, going to high school and college campuses. And you might say, well, Charlie, my chapter has 5 people like yesterday. That's a big threat to them. Relentless rebels launching a sabotage campaign against their plan throws sands in the gears. It is this remnant of rebellion that makes their revolution hard, that makes fun of them, that mocks their ideas, that is relentless against their pressure campaign. Like, no, I'm actually not doing that. I'm not doing the pronouns. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to hold you to the own book of your own rules. I'm going to multiply your impact. I'm going to have Candace Owens come and speak. I'm going to have Charlie Kirk come and speak. I'm going to come bring a guest speaker. This all makes a difference against their forced conformity, everybody. It does. And we know that because the media considers what Turning Point is doing. They have to smear and slander us like, oh, it's a big threat. Yes, it is a threat. The media is finally telling the truth. Turning Point USA is a threat to these Maoists that are taking over America because you tell the truth and you do it in a way that is appealing.
That's 100% true. I'm going to tell you guys, a friend of mine named Brett Weinstein, you may have heard of, he went through a struggle session himself at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington a number of years ago, around when we were writing those fake academic papers. And he has a saying that he says that I want you guys to think about a lot, even if you have a chapter with 5 members or 30 is whatever. Or I went to Northwestern, I spoke at Northwestern, they told me there are 8,600 students on campus and 100 are conservative. They're outnumbered 85-1. That's a lot, and that's discouraging. But what Brett says is that 1 is a special number. 0 and 1 are the 2 most important numbers here. They want 0 resistance. 0. They don't have the ability in our free country at this point to make the number 0 unless you quit. If you don't quit, and there's 5 of you, 5 is not 0. 5 is 1 times 5. It is more than 0. Even 1. We have one major social media platform where there's legitimate ability to speak our minds, and they are losing their ever-loving minds about it. They are flipping out that Elon Musk bought Twitter, and people can say things on Twitter that aren't supposed to be said. Speaking as somebody who got kicked off that platform for 5 months. Yeah, Charlie got kicked off. Yeah, they cannot abide a single truth teller. And if you guys, again, you want to get biblical, look back in the Bible. How many times is it everybody's going all wrong? What happens? One prophet stands up and is like, y'all are screwing up, and all of a sudden, there's redemption.
And then they screw up again.
Well, of course, because humans are humans. That never changes, which they actually believe the other way around.
Now, if I can interrupt, I really believe you guys are going to be the Joshua generation. How many of you have parents, raise your hands, that don't take this as seriously as you do? Raise your hands. Okay, about half the room. That's interesting, isn't it, James?
Yeah.
So what do you make of that? 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, about half the room raise their hands that say that their parents don't take their involvement as serious. Not that they don't care, but it's not as much as them. What's going on? It should be the other way around, shouldn't it?
It really should. I mean, there are groups where I think it might go the other direction, but
it's half. There should be no hands that go up.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So what drives that?
Well, unfortunately, people my age we were in a very propagandized. I know you guys are in the most propagandized generation of all time. We were in a very propagandized generation, and we went to sleep, and that's why you are in this unfortunate position. So what I see, though, is when half these hands go up, I see a lot of people who have become more switched on than we were, which is why we got in this mess. For 50 years, conservatives basically went to sleep, except for the ones that were trying to sell our country. And that's unfortunate. They were working really hard. Now we have a new generation. You're talking about this, Joshua. We have this new generation ready to start stepping up, ready to start being truth lovers and truth tellers that are going to be the major problem for this organization, or this agenda being pressed down on us.
And what do I mean by the Joshua generation, right? So God delivers his chosen people out of Egypt. They're in the wilderness. But there is this generation that constantly complains, but they have no understanding of freedom. All they remember is slavery. And there's this tension. And God does not deliver them to the promised land. In fact, he has to wait for that generation to kind of go away, is a nice way to put it, right? Moses and Aaron, they don't get to go into the promised land, right? And it's not until Joshua are you able to actually deliver that promise. Now, you could take that wherever you want, but what I think in the end of Deuteronomy, you see that kind of fulfillment where it's right before kind of the first book of Joshua. It says it so clearly, where you guys are going to be a generation that I think are finally equipped to revitalize and restore self-government in this country. I truly believe it. I think that, and you have to embody it. And this is not a negative towards your parents, but I get frustrated because you are more based than 90% of the boomers I talk to.
Do you guys?
No, seriously.
Yeah, I was about to ask. Do you guys trust the CDC? Say it louder. Yeah, that's what I thought.
But 90% of even some of our donors think that it's wrong to question the CDC, or it's wrong to say the FBI should be, broken up. They think that not a lot of our donors are great. I'm talking just like more macro, right, James?
Yeah, I mean, people like my age and up, we're all like, well, yeah, the CDC says it, okay. But now y'all are like, the CDC says it, do the opposite and we'll be healthy.
And, yeah. They're yelling for Fauci to go to Gitmo. I mean, but this is promising to me because the kids are based.
Kids are based.
And abolish the FBI. And this gives me hope in a sense, because you know why you guys have these beliefs, and this is why I'm as radical as I am on this stuff, is because you have to live around it all the time on high school and college campuses. You are seeing the Cultural Revolution every day. And then you kind of go to maybe your parents or your uncle or aunt. You're like, you don't understand. And they're like, oh, it's just a flag. It's just pronouns. Who cares if they just want to wear a dress? They're like, you don't get it. It's an all-consuming, you must bend, every knee shall bow to the trans golden calf. You don't get it. They're like, okay. Okay, little Johnny, like whatever. How many of you like understand what I'm saying right now? Like every hand goes up,
yeah,
right?
Right.
And some adults will get it, but it's like you have to look up and be like, can you please stop these maniacs from coming after me? And they're like, but will I still like have a good stock portfolio or like, you know, a country club membership? You're like, they're literally making me do things that are totalitarian. James, help me build this out. There's
let me give
here.
you a story. This is a true story. It was about a month ago. I was talking with a very based mom, and she's telling me this story about she's taking her kid. There's no like euphemism. I told this story yesterday, and somebody's like, "Is that a euphemism?" There's no euphemisms. They're taking her son to go get chicken tenders at the fast food place or whatever. And you know, some of y'all would have been 14 not that long ago. He's 14. He belts out an awkward question, as 14-year-olds sometimes do to their parents, and he says, "Mom, this is how bad it is, Charlie. You're going to watch Charlie's face," because he hasn't heard this story yet. "Mom, would you still love me if I told you that I'm not gay?" Told you. Would you still love me if I told you that I'm not gay? And she's, of course, flabbergasted. She's like, "Buddy, I thought we were getting chicken tenders. What's up?" And he's like, "I'm just asking." And she says, "Well, you know, do you get a lot of pressure to, I mean, I'm going to love you, like, no matter," she's all awkward. And he's like, "Well, you see, this is the thing, is they told us that if you're a real cool mom, you're accepting, and if you're an accepting mom or accepting parents, then probably you expect us to be gay, and there's a ton of pressure on us to be gay. And so I didn't want to disappoint you because I'm not gay, but I didn't know if that was going to be an issue." That's a 14-year-old in, it turns out, a very blue state. That is what they are doing to you. So you fully understand. And she is, of course, very based and immediately, you know, latched in and started doing things. But most parents are not as dialed in as these based moms.
How many of you feel as if that it's fashionable, cool, or the easy thing to be gay, bisexual, trans, lesbian, gay? Yeah, almost every single hand goes up. And yeah, I mean, so like about, how many of you would say that more than 20 to 30% of your school is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans? Yeah.
Yep.
James, what's behind this? 40%, you go to Brown? No, I'm kidding. Brown University, 40% of the kids are gay. Would you say 40% of your school is gay? Where do you go to school? At high school. Where? What state? In Arizona. So what part of Arizona? In Mesa, the East Valley, LDS, Mormon World. 40% of his high school is gay.
I don't believe it, but I believe it.
But
So,
is this forced behavior?
Okay, so you guys have probably heard this thing called social contagion. I'm not talking about that. There is a social contagion, which is not quite correct. There's a strong incentive structure. You guys all raise your hand. Is it cool to be gay? Yep, all the hands. Who thinks it's like treated as cool to be straight? Nobody's celebrating you. You're not special. You're not in a whatever. They've created an inverted incentive structure.
Homeschooler hand goes up.
Yeah, right. No, but they've inverted an incentive structure. This is way beyond social contagion. There's an incentive structure. There's an incentive structure. People follow incentives. They've incentivized being in broadly and academically, technically, the term queer, which is to be in a political position of resisting all of these the norms of society, to resist normativity. So they've created incentive, but it's even worse than that, Charlie. What is causing this? Social contagion alone cannot explain this. The incentive structure alone cannot explain these numbers. Maoism can explain these numbers. Again, another history lesson. Unfortunately, Mao, believe it or not, do you know what he used? They didn't call it this in China, but you know what he used to make the Red Guard? Intersectionality. Intersectionality is what he used. He created 10 different identity categories, and he classified you in those identity categories, if you were younger, primarily based on what your parents were. Were you a rich farmer? Are you a landlord? Oh, that's bad. Are you a counter-revolutionary? Are you a bad influence? That's bad. Are you a right-winger? That was one of the categories. That's bad. And if your parents were, you were, and if you had any of these attitudes, and they bullied you and struggled you. Or on the other hand, were you a peasant? Peasants use sickles, by the way. Were you a laborer? They use hammers. Hammer and sickle. There you go. Or are you one of the many revolutionary groups, revolutionary volunteers, cadres, or martyrs, or your parents being a martyr? Then you're in the good category. So he created a pressure pump. So what do you do now? Well, critical race theory tells you that your national origin, your skin color, and all of this stuff is a problem. So what can you do? Well, you better get activated. You have to become an activist. You have to become an ally. But it's still not good enough. Allyship is problematic. You're just doing it to make yourself look good. You're just trying to get out of your feelings of racism. This is the narrative from CRT, and it is complete poison. But what do they dangle out over here? Sexual identities. Well, those are subjective, aren't they? Can't you just decide you're bisexual this morning? Can anybody question it? That's the more important part. Can anybody, if you showed up at school tomorrow and said, I'm pansexual and demi-romantic. Could a single person at your school tell you, no, you're not? They absolutely cannot. So guess what? There is a not just social contagion, meaning your friends are like, oh, this is what's cool. Not just an incentive structure, but also a pressure pump, an identity politics pressure pump to push people into identifying this way to escape the bullying and the oppression and the stuff that you're all raising your hand that you relate to escape all of those pressures. All you have to do is come out as some sexual or gender identity, and then they'll celebrate you, they'll affirm you, they'll give you special privileges. You're the king and queen of the prom. You can be Miss Netherlands or whatever it is.
If you're a man, you could be Miss Netherlands. That's right.
Yeah, male.
Or you could be a social media influencer.
You could be an influencer and have to move to Peru.
Yeah. So James, I want to get to some questions here because I know the audience is. And how great is James, by the way?
That's Mao, by the way.
And so, James, I want you to do this quickly because I really want to get to questions. Name 3 of your principles that you are writing extensively about that could be applicable to them, the most applicable to them, because you're developing these rules.
Yeah, I'm working on developing these rules. So the first issue that's applicable to you, I already told you. This is the most important one, which is love the truth. You have to start loving, it's a relationship with the truth. You have to start loving the truth. You have to take it in that regard. If you don't, then you're lost. You have no chance. Second one, this is actually something I'm reappropriating from them, which is usually a powerful thing to do. There was a guy, a communist guy, and then a socialist back in the 60s who became conservative, and he wrote down this rule explaining what he experienced in the 60s radical environment, and it was, the issue is never the issue is always the revolution. That means the thing they're trying to make you argue about, they're trying to make you argue about so they can do something else. So if you can learn, you've probably heard us talk about before, you've got to be discerning. You've got to be able to figure out why they want you to argue about sex, gender, sexuality. When I said all this stuff about why is there this incentive structure and then there's this pressure, this is Maoism. They have a purpose for that. If you learn to start identifying that the thing that they're making you deal with is not what they're actually interested in, but they have a purpose, then when you start to call it out, you can start to call it out properly. You get to call it out not in terms of that's not, you're racist. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. That's what they want. You're racist. You want to control me. That's a completely different dynamic. So that's the second thing. Love the truth. The issue is not the issue. They're trying to tangle you up in a BS argument that they can manipulate you with. They're trying to control you is always the answer. And this is the Daniel Penny rule. This is the biggest one. Listen close. Always do the right thing, especially when it's costly. The more they make it cost you to do the right thing, the more important it is to do the right thing. The more likely you are to get in trouble for telling the truth, the more it is necessary you tell the truth and tell the truth today. It will be worse in a week, in a month, in a year. Always do the right thing. So why do I call it the Daniel Penny rule? You guys know who Daniel Penny is. Daniel Penny is the guy on the New York subway that put the guy in the chokehold that was being, a total threat to the whole subway car.
He was threatening everybody.
He was threatening everybody. He puts him in a chokehold, restrains him, and unfortunately the man dies later. So now he's being perp walked and embarrassed and humiliated and put on trial by this, corrupt Blue City DA. He did the right thing. They're making him pay. And the narrative that you're seeing all over social media and the thing that they used to call the Ferguson effect with the police is, they're just not going to do it now. They've learned their lesson. New Yorkers learned their lesson not to stand up for the protection of innocent people. BS. You can't be that person. The more they make it cost you to do the right thing, the more important it is to do the right thing. You must always do the right next thing.